Well, good afternoon, listeners. It's a Saturday afternoon for me. I don't usually do Saturday afternoon interviews when I'm recording, but I was given the gift of reading this book, which I'm going to hold up for you. Now, if you're not seeing the video and listening, it's called Louder Than Hunger by John Schu. I'm going to raise it up a bit more if you're here. His literary agent reached out to me and said, would you be interested in reading this book? And I read it and I was really impacted by the way it was written. And you'll understand if you get this book, but it's a middle grade novel. It's inspired by true events. The author, John, did experience an eating disorder. And this is what this book is about. And it really takes you in the mind of a young child, a middle school student, struggling with an eating disorder, and kind of I don't want to say the whole process necessarily, but his whole thoughts, the voice inside his head that just grows and grows and grows and is basically controlling his life for so long. And then how that voice dims through discipline, through learning to renew his mind and think differently and not listen to his voice. But it follows a short time period, but the book itself is huge. So I first got this thinking, oh my gosh, am I going to finish it in time? And honestly, if you wanted to, you could really read it fast, if you wanted to. But the point of the book, as I was talking to John before we started, is actually to encourage you to take pauses because it's pretty intense. There are some really hard thoughts this boy thinks. And so it was very relatable for me because I have anxiety. And so the breathing techniques even that are discussed in the book at times, you have to do them because you're taking a minute to process all this information. So I wanted to have John on. He has such a passion for reading. He speaks all over at different libraries to encourage kids to read. And he has a passion for kids. He has a passion for reading. And he has illustrated books. I'll have his website attached to this so you can check it out if you're interested. But this is the one I read, middle grade, which I've been enjoying so many middle grade novels. I recently was on a Natalie Lloyd kick for a while. I was reading tons of her books. I love them. They made me cry. They're so sweet and just true. But anyway, John, thank you so much, first of all, for allowing me that tangent and for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you. That was the most beautiful introduction. And I spent time on your website this morning, and I was going to find a way to bring up Natalie Lloyd during our conversation together. And so I'm so grateful that you did. And I saw that you love her book, A Snicker of Magic. And I think you said it's one of your all-time favorite books. And that's one of my all-time favorite books as well. So thank you for the introduction. And thank you for giving a shout out to the one and only Natalie Lloyd.
Well, I was going to ask you, because I have to admit, after I graduated college, I kind of was like, children's books are behind me. I'm an adult now. And then a friend of mine who was getting her master's in literature, but like specifically focusing on middle grade novels, was reading all of these novels for her master's. And she said, Danielle, you got to read Natalie Lloyd. And I said, what's that? And she's like, oh, it's like they were Snicker of Magic and stuff. I'm like, what? No, I read like grown-up books. And then she said, please read it for me. And I'm going to tell you, I'm so surprised at how much I love middle grade novels now. Like, I've been reading so many different authors and your own, and I can't believe like how relatable they are. Like, they're more simple in the vocabulary, obviously, but like super relatable. And so I want to ask you, like, when you started writing children's books, middle grade novels, like, did you always want to do that? Or was there a turning point for you when you're like, I really want to speak to kids at this level because the lessons they're learning are ones I'm still learning? Or how did that work out for you?
Yeah, no, I was a dormant writer for a long time. I didn't want to be a writer for a long time. And can I tell kind of a long story to share how I became a writer?
Yes.
Yeah? All right. So all of my degrees are in education. So I started off as a second grade teacher. And then I was a third grade teacher. And then I was a fourth grade teacher, which means during those years of teaching second, third, and fourth grade, I read a lot I read a lot aloud to kids, and I experienced a lot of stories with kids. And when I was in college, I worked at Barnes and Noble, always in the children's section, and read lots of books and during that time, and recommended many books during that time. And I always thought maybe one day I would go to library school to become a school
Yeah.
librarian. And I didn't think I was smart enough to be a librarian, but eventually I did go to school to become a librarian. And for 9 years, I was a school librarian. And I loved being a school librarian so much to grades K through 5. And I saw right away how stories can help heal our hearts, and how stories can make us more compassionate, and most importantly, how stories can connect us. And after 14 years of teaching elementary school, I left that position to become the ambassador of school libraries. And as the ambassador of school libraries, I used to travel all over the country. I used to travel 220 days a year. I would meet with about 20 to 30,000 students every single year, talking about other people's books. And in my current school visit presentations, even though I've written nine books, not all of them are out yet, I mostly still talk about other people's books because I'm most comfortable as a reader. I'm most comfortable as a book ambassador. But someone named Molly O'Neill saw all this work that I was doing out in the world, and she kept saying, "John, you should be writing your own stories." And I kept saying, "No, I'm not a writer." And she kept saying, "No, you are a writer." And long story short, Molly O'Neill is now my agent. And Molly O'Neill saw something in me that I didn't see within myself. And I thought maybe I would write one or two books. I didn't think that I would keep going on this writing journey, but I really do think that I became a writer. I am a writer so that I could write Louder Than Hunger. And
Mm.
when I published Louder Than Hunger, many people were surprised because I had kept my past of struggling with anorexia nervosa and struggling with obsessive compulsive disorder and depression and anxiety to myself for so long. But it was time. It was time to finally tell that part of my story in hopes that it would help heal other people. But what I didn't realize is how much it would heal me as an adult as well, to finally be so open and so honest about all of the things that I went through as an adolescent in order to become the very mostly well-adjusted, optimistic person who I am as an adult. So that's the long short version.
Was it hard writing the book? Like, did you find
Mm,
yourself reliving any of the things that you felt before?
yeah, Louder Than Hunger was quite easy to actually write because I was able to very quickly go back into my mindset, as a 13, 14, 15-year old who was hospitalized for all the things that I mentioned. Um, at times, though, it was affecting my own mental health, but right away I had systems in place to tell people if I was going too deep, right? And there was one point of writing Louder Than Hunger that for the first time in like 30 years, I was starting to feel fearful of things that I hadn't felt fearful of since I was a teenager.
Mm.
But thankfully, I'm well enough and I had a support system that allowed me to share that maybe I need to take a break from writing this book for a little bit. And I took a break by writing a book that came out this year called Ruthie Rose's Big Idea. And so I worked on other projects while working on Louder Than Hunger in order to go back into a more joyful space, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it
Yeah.
does. Did Now in the book, I don't want to say everything because I want people to read it, but your main character starts experiencing this in middle school. Like that's when it starts
Yeah.
getting really intense. When he's about to head into high school, he's kind of starting to transition over. And was that the same for you when it started?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about the character Jake Stacy, who's in Louder Than Hunger, and me. So I love to tell kids. I'll give you kind of like my elevator pitch speech about the book. I always start by saying that Louder Than Hunger takes place in 1996. So many people would call that historical fiction. And Jake Stacy is in the 8th grade, and you learn right away that Jake Stacy loves Lois Lowry's book, The Giver. And I saw that you got to interview Lois Lowry once, and she's absolutely amazing. And her
Yeah.
books turn so many kids into lifelong readers. And he loves the movie Home Alone, and he loves Stephen Sondheim, which means that one of his favorite musicals is Into the Woods, and he loves rollerblading, and he loves Emily Dickinson, and he talks to Emily Dickinson a lot. And in many ways, Emily Dickinson is his only friend, but she doesn't know that she is his friend. And most importantly, or sadly, there's a very loud inner saboteur, a very loud negative voice that tells Jake Stacy that he doesn't deserve food and he doesn't deserve to take up space and that he's an awful person and he's a repulsive person. And you learn all of this in the first act of the book. And in the first act of the book, Jake Stacy is really spiraling out of control because of that loud negative voice. But it's always really important for me to share that in no way is Jake Stacy, or am I, hopefully, glorifying anorexia, that Jake is not teaching you how to have an eating disorder. Jake is not teaching you how to be sick, like so many books in the past have done that are about anorexia. And in the second act of the book, Jake is hospitalized in a facility called Whispering Pines. And one of the reasons I named it Whispering Pines was because and this is where I start talking about myself being Jake Stacy in so many ways. I was hospitalized in a facility called Linden Oaks in Naperville, Illinois, and I spent 7 months there. And then I left that facility and I spent about another 7 months in another facility. But right away, Jake is diagnosed with anorexia and, as we said, obsessive compulsive disorder, depression, and anxiety. And you spend a year with Jake in the hospital as he tries to muffle that voice. The reason his name is Jake Stacy is because Jake Stacy and John Schu have the same initials, JS. And the reason I named myself Jake in the book is two reasons. One, I needed a little distance from myself, and I decided not to write a true memoir. And then two, I love telling kids that when I was a kid, I really, really wish my name was Jake. And so I give my name, that name in the book.
Wow. Did
Yeah.
you, um, so you, like him, middle school was the starting point, same as Jake?
Yeah, so I was hospitalized when I was in the 8th grade, and
Okay.
I didn't actually come out of the hospital until I was in the 10th grade. I decided
Wow.
to have Jake Stacy spend 1 year in the hospital rather than two like I did, because this book would be like double the size. And 2 years is just too long. But yeah, I missed 2 years of school. Jake Stacy misses about a year of school. But for me, so much of it was middle school. And then when I went back to high school, I was doing much. When I actually started high school, rather, I was doing much better.
Was Now Jake, his parental units are present, but it's hard for him to connect with them. He connects well with his
Yeah.
grandmother,
Yeah, his grandma
but
is
not his mom and
everything.
dad.
Yeah, and that's based on my own story too. Like
Yeah.
I lived with my grandma from Friday to Sunday, and I often talk to kids about it's the only time that I could fully breathe. I lived with my parents Monday through Thursday. I never had a great relationship with them. There wasn't a lot of oxygen in the house that I grew up in, and I love talking to kids about that because so many of them feel that way. And it's to say, like, it's okay to feel that way. And there can be a path through, right? And there can be a brighter future one day.
Yeah.
But yeah, my grandma was my everything. And I love, so many people bring up the grandma first when talking about this book. The grandma and the waterbed are the things I'm asked about the most.
No, those are very
Yeah,
sweet. They were very sweet details, and it brings you back to the beauty of a child often is that a child is just fascinated by the simplest things that you as an adult just kind of pass over, you don't think
yeah,
about anymore, or take for granted. But for a kid, it's like the biggest, best thing ever.
yeah.
Um, when did your grandma also pass away like it does in
Yeah,
the
so
book?
Yeah, so in Louder Than Hunger, Jake has this really great relationship, as we were just talking about, with his grandmother. And I'm going to do a spoiler. His grandmother passes away in the book, and that makes a lot of kids really angry. They'll talk to me like, "Why did the grandma have to die?" And I'll say, "Again, I told you it's based on my own life." And the way that she dies in the book really, really, I think, affects kids deeply, and hopefully makes them have more empathy as well. But is what I did a lot in Louder Than Hunger is I combine people in my lives. So as I said, I was in 2 mental health facilities. Jake is only in 1. It would have been way too hard for the reader if Jake had gone to a second facility, because he would have had to have learned all the people there all over again.
Yeah.
I have a brother in real life. Jake doesn't have a brother. And there were many reasons why I did that. I had 2 grandmas that were in my life. Jake only has 1. And so to answer your question, in my own life, my grandma, who I was very close to, who always wore red, who appears in Louder Than Hunger, did not actually die when I was hospitalized. She
Okay.
lived for 1 more year after I got out of the hospital, and then passed away from pancreatic cancer. But the grandmother who I was less close to did die when I was hospitalized. She was in the middle of writing me a letter when she passed away. And that was, like, of course, like, very emotionally hard. And that's what readers experience in the book.
When you were a kid, just going back to your own experience, because again, if we talk so much about the book, then it's like no one's gonna. We're gonna tell the whole book story, right?
I know, I try not to spoil all of it.
um, for you, can you tell me, like, as much as you're comfortable, when do you remember first hearing a voice in your head, or just something when you started
Yeah.
thinking, I hate myself? Like, I just
Yeah.
hate
Yeah, it
being
goes all the way
me.
back to it goes all the way back to 5th grade. I'm one of the authors of a book called The Creativity Project, which is written by 44 different authors. And in The Creativity Project, I write a piece called Matilda and Me, which is a letter to my 5th grade teacher. And I'll tell you in essence, what I say. I say something like, Dr. Mary Margaret Reed, you might not remember me, but I remember everything about you. You were my 5th grade teacher, and you were patient, and you were kind, and you wore purple every single day. And I was very, very shy, and I was very unsure. And in so many ways, I was afraid of myself. And then I confessed something to my 5th grade teacher in the Creativity Project, which is this: that one day during math, I spotted a brand new copy of the book Matilda in her classroom library, in our classroom library, and it was speaking to me all day, and it was beckoning me to come over and visit it, but I didn't have an opportunity to do that. And so during recess, I snuck back into the school, and I went upstairs to where our classroom was located, and the lights were off and the door was closed, and I entered without permission. And I went over to the classroom library, and I took the copy of Matilda off of the shelf, and I put it in my backpack, and I brought it home, and I read it over and over and over and over again. And I really, really connected with Matilda, and I so connected with loneliness and wanting to be rescued when I was a child. And in the piece, I tell Dr. Mary Margaret Reed that I still have her copy of Matilda all these years later, and that I'm not sorry for stealing it. But when I wrote that piece, I wasn't ready enough, or brave enough, or vulnerable enough to say that when I was hospitalized, it was one of the books that I had my mom bring to the hospital, because it brought comfort to me, and it brought her to me. And it really was brought to me because I knew that that was when I first started to struggle with that inner saboteur. And I don't know, like, what would have happened if I hadn't had Dr. Mary Margaret Reed that year, because she took such good care of me. And
Mm.
I think she helped me, without knowing, keep that voice, like, not totally taking over my life. Because starting in grade 6 is when it got, pretty loud. Grade 7 louder, grade 8 so loud that I just listened to that voice all of the time. So yeah, I don't know if I answered the question fully, but
No,
um,
yeah.
yeah.
And when you got to grade 8, what did life look like for you? Like, when you got up in the morning, what was the first thing you thought? And then how did your day go from there? And then when you went to bed, like, was there any part of your day that you looked forward to?
Yeah, I looked forward to volunteering at a nursing home. So something I didn't explore in the book that's based on my own life is that after, in the middle of grade 6, I switched from public school to private school. I switched to a very, very small Baptist school that only had 50 students. And in one draft of Louder Than Hunger, I explored this. It only had 50 students, grades K through 12.
Wow.
And by the time I got to 8th grade, there were only 3 of us in the 8th grade. And it was this very independent curriculum. And it was a school that really allowed you to isolate yourself all day. because all 50 of us had our own little offices. They were like almost like library carrels, and you would work in that space independently all day.
Wow.
And if you had a question, you would put up your Christian flag. And when you finished a pace, like a pace was like this booklet that you would have to do so many of every week. You would put up your American flag, and that meant that your teacher would come to you, and then they would like grade it, and then you'd have to memorize a Bible verse for each one. And it was I thought it was actually good for me, but it was actually really bad for me because I was able to isolate like a lot in that school system. But then what was so unique about it was that we only went to school from 9 o'clock until noon. And then you were expected to volunteer in the afternoons, which is
Uh,
why in Louder Than Hunger, Jake Stacy volunteers at a nursing home. And I felt a lot of happiness when I was at the nursing home because I wasn't with people my own age, and I was with older people who were way more accepting of me and very motherly to me and very paternal to me. But again, it was a way for me to hide in so many ways. And it's because of a blind lady who I would read to every afternoon that I found myself hospitalized because she called my mom and said, "Your son is not okay."
Even though she was blind, she knew that.
Yeah, she just knew. Yeah, she knew. Just I don't know if she was good at like reading people's souls, right, or their presence, or just feeling that this person isn't okay.
Huh.
Yeah.
Did you, if you only had two other students with you in the school, was it, because I'm wondering when you say that you felt more accepted among your older peers, but not the younger ones, was it, but if you weren't interacting with them at all, was it kind of, how did that work out?
Well, there were 50 of us in one room. It was like a one-room schoolhouse.
Oh, it was
Yeah,
one
no,
room.
there was, yeah,
Okay.
it was just one room. It was one room, grades K-12. In some ways, I wish my editor had let me keep it in. I think it would have added an interesting layer to Louder Than Hunger. But yeah, it was 50 of us in one room. We had no PE, no art, no music. It was just, you'd sit in this little cubicle doing your Christian education all day.
What
Yeah.
did the kids ever say anything to you that really stuck with you?
Yeah, well, they did, like, when I was in public school, yes, but not
Okay.
so much at the private school, yeah, but plus we weren't there that much. Like, we were only there from, 9 to noon. It's a very short school day.
What was
Yeah.
something you believed about yourself really fiercely as a kid that was really wrong?
Yeah, I just didn't think that I was, like, deserving of goodness, for a lot of my childhood or worthy of, like, of living, because of that, loud inner saboteur.
Was
Yeah.
the um like, did you find yourself, when you say not worthy of living, was the eating disorder, were you hoping, because I'm guessing at some point, because even in the book, your protagonist eventually puts a name to it, but he's not really
Yeah.
surprised by it. It's kind of like, yeah, I knew something
Yeah.
was wrong, but I didn't want to fix it yet. I wasn't at
Yeah,
that
well,
point.
yeah, I think in so many ways, like Jake calls it his capital V voice, and for most of the book, Jake refers to it as the capital V voice. And for a lot of the book and a lot of like my own experiences with anorexia was that I didn't realize that I was the voice, like it was me in there, and
Yeah.
that I was actually able to control the voice, but it felt like the voice was in control of me, and it felt like the voice was just dictating everything that I was supposed to do. And in the book, Jake doesn't real for a lot of the book, Jake doesn't want to get better, but he eventually realizes that he's tired of living in this facility, and he's tired of being, the boy with anorexia, that maybe he can be really good at recovery. And that's what happened to me in my own story. And something I don't explore in the book, but that I do in presentations with kids and adults, is that when I was hospitalized, I went on the Oprah Winfrey show, and this was the 90s, and Oprah's show was really, really popular in the 90s. And I went on the show for an episode called Boys with Eating Disorders, and
Oh,
told the world all about my anorexia, and told the world that I didn't want to get better because I didn't think that I could ever talk back to the voice. And being on the Oprah Winfrey show was really, really bad for me because I became known as the boy with anorexia, and that like became my identity, and it was toxic. And through lots and lots and lots of therapy, and through getting kicked out of a program and then going to a new program, I had to finally make this decision that I was going to start doing the things that my therapist, had told me about, and the things that my dietitian had talked about. That I gleaned all the skills. I just had to actually apply them.
Did you wanna die? Like, did you want it to kinda just
Well,
fizzle?
I mean, I think that, yeah, I think in so many ways, an eating disorder is a slow form of suicide. Yeah,
Yeah. No,
yeah,
that's true. Though when I've talked to people who've personally experienced it, they don't I think they really think, at least in my conversations with them, until it gets to a point where it's so bad that they can't, like, they're like, "I can't do this anymore." Like, this is breaking
yeah,
point. Um, they really don't think they're going to die. Like, they really think they can keep it up for as long as possible, and, you're looking at them and you're like, "You gotta do something, like, you
yeah,
really don't look good." But it's almost like each person, at least the ones I've interacted with, who I've loved and have been in my life, it was like they had to come to a breaking point of their own. Like, maybe you
yeah,
thought the breaking point was 15 steps before, but
yeah.
they had their personal breaking point that was like, "I
Yeah.
can't do this
Yeah.
anymore."
Yeah. And I felt that a lot. You were talking in the beginning about rediscovering your love of children's books. And when you were saying that, is what I was thinking is, well, children's books almost always end in hope. Adult
Yeah,
books don't always end in hope. So
no.
a lot of people going into Louder Than Hunger, it's most likely going to end in a hopeful way. Hopefully not like a Hallmark movie Pat way, where everything is
Yeah.
okay at the end, and Jake goes out into the world and he never has another problem or a fear of food. The book ends knowing that Jake is probably going to be okay, right? But I can't remember the point I was just trying to make. Go back a moment. What did you say right before?
Oh, breaking points
Oh, yeah, okay,
and
sorry, sorry. So when I was writing Louder Than Hunger, I always knew, like, eventually Jake was going to get onto the path of recovery because it's based on my own story. But I'd have to say to myself, Jake, I have to hurt you one more time. I'm sorry. I have to give you a little bit more pain. But I promise eventually you'll start doing better. And that was hard. And in revision, my editor would say, shed a few times, like, I think he just needs to get a little bit worse right here before he's able to start turning things around. But that was, like hurting my own childhood self again in some ways.
that's the interesting thing about therapy, but also just, because 'cause I've been in therapy now, I think, for 6 years, and what's so interesting about it is you go back and you get to watch your childhood
Yeah,
like you are just an observer. And then you get to talk to the child in you, and like you see like, wow, I really went through a ton. If as you're
yeah,
looking at it from that outside perspective. And it's like it's a painful process, but it's like getting to talk to that kid and say, I'm sorry you didn't get A, B, C, these things that you needed, and that
yeah,
people failed you in this way. But this is what we can do to embrace life differently than you grew up thinking you had to. And it's so painful though, because that kid
yeah,
in the background, like that is your story. Like you redeem
yeah,
it, but at the same time, that kid is going to always have that story. And so
yeah.
there's the beauty from the ashes aspect, but you can't erase the ashes. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's why in the beginning I said writing Louder Than Hunger healed adult me in so many ways. That I went back, throughout I went really to write Louder Than Hunger. I took a journey backwards, from I was 40 when I started writing Louder Than Hunger, and, was able to go all the way back to like the early 80s and all my memories, and was able to excavate so many memories, and was able to go back to situations that I really had like forgotten about, or that I had tried to sweep under the rug as a way not to deal with, as I got older. So writing Louder Than Hunger was so, so therapeutic. And I'm so grateful that it's out in the world, because so many kids have told people about their own, inner negative voices, and many of whom are in treatment centers because of this book, and were felt inspired to ask for help. and didn't want to continue down that the path of destruction.
You're in
Yeah.
your 40s?
I am 44. Yes, I'm 44.
You do not you
Yeah.
look very
Oh, okay.
young.
Yeah, I am 44. I love
Yeah.
telling kids, yeah, because I didn't talk about this, but my full-time job is doing school visits, and so I usually meet about 2,000 kids every week, and it's the
Wow.
biggest honor, and yeah, yeah, and I love talking about that I'm 44.
And they do they think they believe you or they think you're
Well, for
joking?
them, they probably think yeah, the age is interesting for.
That's true. Do you have a I mean, and I'm sorry, I don't if you don't have to answer this, you don't want to, but I wondered
Yeah,
because in on your website, you're like, "I love kids, I love reading, all this,"
yeah.
but didn't mention if you had a family, like a
Yeah,
wife or kids of your own.
yeah, no, I don't have kids. Yeah, I have 2 cats, though. I have a cat named Percy Jackson, and I have a cat named Ramona Quimby, so I have very, very literary cats.
Did do you want kids or it just didn't happen kinda thing?
No, I feel like I'm with I work out in the world with kids. They're my, life's mission, of going through, journeys through story with them, but, right now, no, I don't think so. Yeah, I don't
What
know.
is, when because I don't work with I work with kids, like, once a week, but it's not my job, and so I've always wondered, if you're meeting so many kids from different schools, from different backgrounds, is there something about kids now in the age we're living in that you find different or that there's an emphasis in their lives that's different than when you were growing up as a kid?
Well, I think one of the reasons that I decided to have Louder Than Hunger take place in 1996 was so that I didn't have to include social media and I didn't have to include phones. And that is when I went through, struggled with an eating disorder, was in the 90s. So I think like the pressure is a little different now, and the technology and that which we're exposed to is different. But what I don't think is different is kids just want to experience story, and they want to go on journeys through story, and we all want to experience joy and connection, and I find right now more than ever that teachers are really, really in need of that, because being a teacher is really, really challenging, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know that when I was speaking to a lady, I don't know, a couple months ago who's a teacher, or was for a long time, and she said a big thing for her was like, in many ways, you'd become a counselor, even though you weren't a counselor, because you'd have kids come
Oh
to
yeah.
you or parents come to you, and you'd be like, this is not like you had this strange multiple job of like, yeah, I'm teaching the kid math, but this kid doesn't even have lunch, or
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
kid doesn't even know how to socialize with other people because they're just really struggling with anger or just
Yeah.
outbursts. And like suddenly the teacher, she said it's like you're all these things at once, but you're just called a teacher.
Yeah. Well,
But
you're wearing lots of hats, right? I
yeah,
mean, you're a pseudo parent, you're a social worker, you're a grandfather, yeah, yeah, you're everything. Yeah, and you have to be open and honest and available, emotionally available. I think like you have to be genuine. I think kids realize right away if someone is not a genuine article, if they're fake. Yeah.
do you have to experience that even just traveling and reading to
Yeah,
kids?
every day is like the first day of school that I go into a space for the first time where I haven't met the kids in person. I mean, hopefully they've read some of my books, so we've met through story. But I always just meet them where they are, and each journey is different. Each experience is different, but each experience is so heart growing and so transformative and such an honor. Yeah.
Is there a particular one you can share that made a big impact on you?
I mean, they all are like this week. I was on Long Island this week. I went to two middle schools in Levittown, New York, and this is my third school year going there to meet with all the sixth graders. And it always feels like a homecoming. Although I've never met those sixth graders before, I know that every year I get to go back there, and each year it's so different. Like as I said, you meet them where they are, and they open up to you, and they share parts of themselves with you about their own obsessive compulsive disorder, their own insecurities, their own anxiety. And then the next day this week, I went and I was with kindergarten, first and second graders, and they just want, they just want to be like surrounded by joy and connection, and each one is special. Each one is different.
Is it hard at times for you to hear these burdens from kids and then know you're like won't see them again?
Yeah, for louder than hunger. Like I love when I go to like maybe 2 middle schools in a week and then 3 elementary schools, because it's only during middle school and high school that I talk about louder than hunger. And those are a lot more emotionally draining, because I have to go back and talk about my childhood and talk about my struggles. But again, end with that like there can be a path through, and that I'm an adult who still struggles with obsessive compulsive disorder, but is able to manage it, right? And I talk to them about how when I was their age, I had the uppercase V voice, and now I have a lowercase v voice, and I work
Mm,
every day to keep that voice lowercase. Um, but what I have to do for my own mental health is this: after each experience with kids, I always write a unique poem that I send to the school, in which I
wow.
reflect on everything that we did that day and all the experiences we had that day. And then I have to move on. Like I can't keep it with me. And when, kids reach out to me about their own trauma, I'm able to respond to it, but I can't keep it with me, right? Because that would affect my own mental health.
So when you send the poem, you don't have a copy of it anywhere. It's kind of like you let
No,
it
it's via
go.
email. Yeah, yeah. It's my favorite thing because it's my way of like going,
Yeah.
it's my way of reflecting and then moving on.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and I like how you say that it was capital, now it's lowercase, because I think people either think it's going to go all away. I think I thought
Mhm,
that when I started. How can I get this to go away was my goal. And then or if I watch a film or a movie, a lot of times it's going to become the worst ever and you're going to become such a despicable person that you'll die and everyone will hate you.
mhm.
Um, but, like, a very authentic journey of mental health has been hard for me to find, like, especially in film, um, which is a medium that so many people enjoy, and it is storytelling. It's a very
Yeah,
vivid storytelling. Um, and I like how you say, though, that it becomes lowercase because it's not something some people are given the gift that it completely goes away, and I have met people like that. I think that's amazing. But it's not the
yeah,
common story. It's mostly, what do you do so that what used to control you is a tool you're using in your life, but it's still there, and there can be days when you feel like you didn't do that great, or maybe it was more
oh,
overwhelming
yeah, of
than normal.
course.
Do you like, each day, when you say OCD, I've met people who the common thought of OCD, because my husband has it, common thought of it is, you wash your hands over and over and over and over. But for my husband, it's very much like when he does something wrong or if he messes
Mhm,
up, he punishes himself. And so as he's learned over the years and growing up, because now he's almost, in his 30s, it's like learning that you don't have to do something. No ritual is needed to
yeah.
cleanse the bad that you've done or the mistake you did, or even sometimes just the perceived mistake you made. And so when you like for your OCD, what what did it look like before and now what is it now? Like do you
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, for like anybody who reads Louder Than Hunger, you'll see, Jake's OCD is very related to food and
Yes.
rituals around food. And for me as an adult, it's more spiral thinking. It's more like, repetitive thoughts. It's more like really tied to anxiety in so many ways. I've been medicated for a very long time though. And so I feel like I've had my obsessive compulsive disorder under control, for most of my adult life. And so
Yeah.
for yeah, yeah,
No, I know I have
yes,
medicine too. Medicine is a good thing. It's
yeah.
very helpful.
Well, in therapy, as you said, yeah, therapy for me, writing. I mean, writing and walking are the two things that help me the most.
Yeah.
You being, especially poetry, writing poetry really helps me. Yeah.
Do you have like a personal poetry book that's just yours?
Poems that I've written or poems that I love to read.
Like a journal poem, poetry. Like, where you just every day or just whenever you feel like it, you're writing poetry in there?
Yeah, I feel like everything that I write comes out as poetry. Like my picture books are all poems. When I tell kids they're poems, they're like, "Really? I don't think they are." And I'll show them like how to put the poem back together. So yeah, for me, it's just everything kind of comes out of me as poetry.
When
Yeah.
did that love start for you about poetry specifically? Like, do
Yeah,
you
for me, it
like
was just
Emily
like
Dickinson?
oh, I do. Yeah, like I would talk to Emily Dickinson all the time as a kid. The "I'm Nobody, Who Are You?" that poem, and Shel. It all started like my love of poetry. Like many people, started with Shel Silverstein. You know, if Sarah Cynthia Sylvia Stout would not take the garbage out, and The Fly Is In, and Mrs. McTwitter, the babysitter, and I didn't realize until I started talking about Louder Than Hunger is that poetry has always helped my anxiety, particularly memorizing poetry. Like I remember being a
Hmm.
kid and having a hard time like turning off my brain and going to sleep, and I would just repeat poetry. I'd repeat like Chicken Soup with Rice, and I would repeat, Sarah Cynthia Sylvia Stout, which I mentioned. And I don't know, poetry has always had like kind of a calming effect on me. Even though, as you said, my poetry in Louder Than Hunger makes people anxious.
Well, that's the goal. Yeah, it's not like that's all your poetry, which maybe
Yeah.
if that was all your poetry, we'd be like, "How are you
Yes.
doing?" You know, it's
Yeah,
this
no.
is the way you write
Well,
all
I
the
know,
time.
like, like, This Is a School, my picture book is a poem. It's about my love of school and what school can be and how school can be a place of hope and healing and connection. And then This Is a Story is my poem all about the power of libraries and librarians
Yeah.
and coming together, in that space. So, yeah, most of my poetry is very, very cheery.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you, because when I was reading this book, I underlined some things or things that stood out to me. But um, one thing that stood out to me is that your protagonist in the book has this statue that he comes across at some
Oh,
point.
yeah, Frieden.
Yeah, and
Yeah, yeah.
he thinks about it a lot and even talks about it in his mind when he's not around the statue, and almost talks to it as you would talk to God or like some sort of
Yeah,
religious
in a lot
figure.
of ways.
And so I wanted to ask you, like, is that something you added for a personal touch to the book? Is that when you were mentioning like a Christian school before,
Mhm.
is there some sort of is that almost a musing back to that time
Yeah,
or
no, that actually, Frieden came about because I wrote most of Louder Than Hunger in New York City, and I usually stay at the Marriott Marquis, which is at 46th and Broadway. And what I'm about to say is what I say to middle schoolers, is I say to them, once a month, I would go to New York City for a week to work on Louder Than Hunger, and I'd always stay at 46th and Broadway, and I show them a photo of the Marriott Marquis, and then I show them the view that I would see outside of my room of New York City, and then I would show them the notebook. Here, I'll show you. This is the notebook that I write all my books in. And for
Hmm.
Louder Than Hunger, I have about 70 of them over there because I wrote the entire book in notebooks before I moved to the computer. And so I always tell
Wow.
kids that I would take this notebook off of my desk in my hotel room and I'd put it in my tote bag. And I would always walk in the morning almost 2 miles to the Bethesda Fountain, which is an angel statue in Central Park. And as I was walking to the Bethesda Fountain to prepare myself to write, because then I would do a lot of my beginning of day writing next to Bethesda,
Hmm.
is I would always think about H.D. Camillo, who is my favorite author. And H.D. Camillo wrote a book called The Tiger Rising. And The Tiger Rising is about a boy named Rob, and Rob is really sad because his mom recently passed away. And he and his dad just moved to a new town in Florida. And they're living in a motel and they don't have a lot of money. And he doesn't have any friends. And he doesn't have a librarian who goes to the store and buys him a notebook like this. So instead, I always tell kids, is what Rob does in the book is he keeps all of his feelings inside and he keeps all of his emotions inside, and then he puts a tiger on top of the suitcase of his heart. And I always tell middle schoolers that when I was doing that walk from 46 and Broadway to Bethesda, I'd be doing a lot of internal work to open up the suitcase of my heart and tell myself, John, you cannot tell Jake Stacy's story unless you do that. And during that time, I literally would be opening up myself and I'd be preparing myself to write. And then I would sit down next to Bethesda and I would usually write for about a half hour. And I spent so much time with her that she became a character in the book. And that's the origin story of Frieden in Louder Than Hunger. I couldn't name her Bethesda because the book doesn't take place in New York City. And so in one of the poems, I think I write something like, she's based on another statue
Hmm.
in a city. So yeah. So Bethesda was not a part of my childhood. I mean, Frieden was not a part of my childhood, but she wrote herself into the book because of spending so much time with that statue and that space. I don't know if you've been to the Bethesda Terrace in New York City.
I
It's
no.
just this amazing space with incredible energy. And it feels like a very spiritual place to me as well, to answer your initial question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you because I don't know, like, just personally for me, I don't know what I would have done without God in my life because there were some really dark days for me. And I think especially my teenage years going into college, my mom almost took her life before I went to
Mm,
college. And I saw that, and that impacted so many things for me about what I thought about people and love. And, I don't know what I would have done without God and like some spiritual network and foundation and community to help me. Because
yeah.
yeah, as you said so well before, you want to just be alone and crawl into
Mhm.
some corner in some darkness and just read some book yourself and like just completely isolate because the feelings are really big when you're a kid. Um, but then when you mention the school you went to, and please, I'm not trying to be offensive here, but it sounds
Oh, not at all.
weird. Raising
Well,
flags and like
yeah,
that's when
yeah.
teachers would interact with you. So I wanted to ask,
Yeah.
like, did that put a bad taste in your mouth for
Yeah.
God?
Well, it was a little bit like, yeah, I don't want to go down a road of negative. It was a little bit, I realized as an adult it was like a cult. And I think it's
Okay.
one of the reasons it was written out of the book. Because it was a lot for the reader to explore and for me to explore and for me to be sensitive to many things as well. But I've always been a very spiritual person and I've always really connected with angels. When I was on the Oprah Winfrey show, I talked about my eating disorder to Oprah by saying that it felt like there was always an angel and a devil on my shoulder, and the devil was
Yeah,
like
you
the
say
eating
that in the book
disorder.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Where the devil was always telling me not to eat and to restrict, and that I didn't deserve love and kindness and connection. And then the angel who in on the show I start referring to as myself, which my counselor thought was really interesting at the time, is the logical part of me saying, no, you do deserve that, and you do deserve to be here. And so I think I've always connected with angel statues. And after saying that on national television, I wonder if I have any here. No, they're in the closet over there. Many people sent me angel statues, so they were on
Really?
display for, yeah, as a way of saying, listen to the angel. The angel is going to take care of you. So yeah.
Wait, when you were asked on the Oprah Winfrey Show, was that like your choice to go on the Oprah Winfrey Show, or was it?
No, yeah, my mom was desperate for a new treatment center,
Okay.
and after each Oprah episode, they'd always say something like, "We're looking for people who blah 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 blah." And my mom just happened to be watching the Oprah Winfrey Show, and they said, "We're looking for males with eating disorders," and it was specific to this treatment center in Canada that was run by somebody named Peggy Claude Pierre. And she was on the episode as well. And my mom came up with this plan, or that she tried to, that maybe if I go on the Oprah Winfrey Show, I'll be able to go to this treatment facility in Canada that they claimed had a really good success rate, but it was like a $200,000 fee to get in. And
Oh
so my
wow.
mom thought, like, maybe I can, try to get Oprah to pay for it. And it was like this very manipulative thinking. And none of that worked out, but it's why I ended up on the Oprah Winfrey Show. That's because
That
my
must
mom
have
called the
been
1-800 number. Yeah.
that must have been really hard for you to have to sit in front of all these people you didn't know or really
Yeah.
understand the magnitude of an Oprah show and
Yeah.
have to
Yeah. It was,
express your feelings to people and you're like, "What am I doing here?"
yeah, it was, yeah. Yeah. But it's part of my story.
Do you What was your first thought when you saw those faces looking at you?
Well, actually, it worked out that I was via satellite on the Oprah Winfrey Show.
Good.
Yeah, but no, but I was supposed to go to Harpo Studio. So I live in the Chicagoland area. That's where Oprah Winfrey's studios was in Chicago. So the hospital that I was at was about 45 minutes from Harpo Studios. And so
Okay.
the original plan was for me to go to the Harpo Studios, do it live, but then I went back into a wheelchair. And in Louder Than Hunger, Jake Stacy comes out in and out of a wheelchair. And so I was back in the wheelchair, and they medically wouldn't allow me to travel. And so I had to do it via satellite. So I think via satellite was better.
Yeah, it probably saved you from
Yeah.
another traumatic
Yeah.
memory.
Where I could only hear Oprah in my ear. Yeah.
The treatment centers that my friend shared with me were really cold places. And in the book, the treatment centers that you mentioned, they were definitely Whispering Pines was definitely not, I would say, a colorful place. It was
Mm.
you had characters who
Yeah.
particularly made or brought some color to the environment, but was a more sterile feel when you're at Whispering
Uh,
Pines, but nobody was mean to you. It seemed like everyone
yeah.
was
Yeah.
definitely much more, in the book, they were all very medically minded and were very logical, and they would explain that to Jake in that sense, but it wasn't a very emotive the staff wasn't as emotive except for the man with the colored tie who really
Oh,
liked the
yeah.
art
Pedro.
therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, is that have you found that that was your experience going to a center where kids
Mm.
could go and you have to go because it's this intensive, like, we need you to live kind of thing?
Yeah.
But do you feel like is there a way to make those kind of places more colorful or not really?
Well, I don't think you want to make it too comfortable for the person because you don't want them to want to
That's
stay.
true. That's true.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Louder Than Hunger was sterile. I'm not Louder Than Hunger. Whispering Pines was, but I think they really love Jake though. I think they really want what's best for him. I think Jake is the most cruel for a lot of the book.
Yeah.
Because he resists so much and he's so angry. But it's pretty like the one facility that I was in, Linden Oaks, is very, very much like how I write about Whispering Pines.
So it wasn't to an extreme of like bad. It was just just want to go home.
Yeah, but I think eventually Jake Stacy doesn't want to go home. In the place,
That's
I just
true.
said a moment
Yeah.
ago, you don't want to make it too comfortable, but then the real world is so scary.
Yeah.
That I think in so many ways that's why Jake wants to remain sick after a certain point is because he doesn't want to go back out into the world. Because going back out into the world feels really scary. But that's a horrible, yeah, mindset.
Yeah, no, but also his going back home for him, at least in the
Yeah,
book, which I liked that you did this. I think it was I don't know if it was intentional, but like it was vague what his home life was like. Like you
yeah,
had moments where he would explain like times with dad, times with mom, and you could kind of get these personality traits from moments with them, but it was vague. So you weren't
yeah,
quite sure why or what was
yeah,
happening at home that made him not like home as much as grandma's.
yeah.
But because I mean, as a kid and even as myself, you could insert whatever you wanted that was relatable
Yeah,
to you
and
about
that's
that.
really in so many ways, that's why I did that, was so that
Yeah.
you could insert your own self. It wasn't tied too much to one thing. Also, like, making the decision not to write it as a memoir, of course, I know the mom and the dad really well because 'cause they're my mom and dad, and I wanted to protect them in some ways too, like, in one draft of the book, we explored in one draft of the book, I explored Jake's mom's own mental illness a lot more.
Yeah.
In one draft of the book, you really, really knew that Jake's mom is bipolar. I put little things throughout the story for you to maybe think Jake's mom is bipolar without directly saying that.
Yeah.
So I think, like, when it came time to write this book, I had to make decisions of what things from people's own lives within my world. It wasn't my story to tell. Like, it
Yeah.
wasn't my story to tell my mom's mental health issues. Yeah, but they come up in interviews and when kids ask, for honest questions. When they ask me questions, I'm going to be honest. I have to, share some things that aren't on the page.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I get that. And I think that's respectful and kind too. It doesn't show a vindictiveness that you would want to
yeah,
just lay out everyone's dark
yeah.
secrets. But I want to ask you, because this is something I'm still working on with some people in my life that I've loved, of having to forgive them because I realize they sinned against me and left scars that I have to do the healing for, which
Mm.
is really a bummer. That's the
Yeah,
way to
yeah.
say it. And so, do you think you've come to a point in your life where you forgive, like you genuinely think you forgive the people who encouraged or helped what you ended up struggling with for so
Yeah.
long?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say yes. So much of it as an adult reflecting back is realizing that so many of the people did the best they could in that situation. Like that Jake's mom, I did think the best that she could do at that time, and his dad as well, being then my mom and my dad and
Yeah.
many people in my lives. But yeah, and I think that's why writing Lighter Than Hunger was so healing, because I was able to let go of a lot of stuff, and
Yeah.
able to truly like move forward. Yeah.
Is
So
that
yeah.
something you are able to convey to the kids, or is that too big a concept, you think, for them to
Yeah,
understand?
it comes up sometimes in presentations or like in book club meetings that I'll have with students who ask questions, but it's not like my main through talking point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, John, to be respectful of your time, I just want to ask you my question.
Well, of course.
Is there, obviously, this is, monumental. I mean, I'd love to leave an impact of some kind like you have with your book, where you could be very vulnerable and you've left this for people to read, and many people you never meet or talk to will read it and have read it. Um, is there one aspect of your life or something ahead that you really would like to have the courage to write about someday that you haven't yet?
No, I don't, I mean, this is like the book I was always writing myself toward, writing about
Yeah.
school and story and about my teacher. I don't know. I don't know what would be next. A lot of people are demanding a sequel to Louder Than Hunger. So if I end up writing a
Wow.
sequel, I don't know. There could be other things that I would explore. Uh, and I'm working on lots of other projects right now as well. And I think a piece of myself is in all of them. The
Yeah.
book that I'm working on, one of the stories I'm working on right now, I'm able to explore some things through one of the main characters that I wish I had explored in Louder Than Hunger, and I'm still trying to figure out if that actually belongs in the book or if I need to write another book about it. I'm being vague because like publishing is
Yes.
nothing but secrets. It's nothing but secrets. So I don't want to be like, well, I'm writing this thing, and then my publisher gets upset that I share it. So yeah, I guess there are other things, and I'm exploring them maybe in the book that I'm writing right now.
Oh, and I
Yeah. So
wanted to
that,
ask, is there a food you delight in now that you couldn't allow
yeah.
yourself to delight
Oh,
in? Because in the book, wasn't it, what was he most afraid of? Was it popcorn?
no,
No, or mac and
he's afraid
cheese?
of like pizza. I think he's afraid of pizza. He's afraid of like everything. Yeah, there aren't any foods I'm afraid of now. Ice cream, like I think ice cream. I think anything that brought him joy with grandma, he's kind of afraid of. Like the ice cream
Is
sundaes.
But now,
You
is there
know,
a food for you that you're like, "I love this." Like, you used to never touch it, and now it's like, "Ugh,
yeah.
love
Well, I
this
would say
food."
well, for me myself, like my biggest fear food when I was at Linden Oaks was pizza and fries, and both of those things I love. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I love fries too, and if you put them with the pizza, it makes everything even just
It's
better.
even better. Yes.
Well, John, it was such a gift to
Oh,
talk with
thank
you.
you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
writing this book, and for
Well,
doing
thank you
this
for
interview.
reading it. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And you asked me, like, I've talked about Louder Than Hunger a lot, and you asked me things that have not come up before. So thank you for that.
Good. I'm glad. I wish I could go back and be a kid and go to one of your presentations,
Oh,
but
but you can come to one of my presentations as an adult.
do they
So,
allow you to do that?
well, I do have public things sometimes. Yeah.
Okay. I'll need to keep
Thank
an eye on
you.
your website, because I'm
Yeah.
not sure
Yeah.
schools be like, "What's this weird
Yeah.
person
No,
doing?"
you never know. Maybe one day. But thank you. Thank you so
You're
much for.
welcome. Bye, John.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you. Thanks.
you.